I see you and I hear you. How are you?
Oh, okay. I'm doing real good. First and foremost, I want to thank you for coming on the platform. This is really an honor. I appreciate you.
Thanks. I appreciate being asked to be on your show. You've got
Oh yeah,
a impressive list of guests.
thank you so much. I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you because you worked with some of the greatest musicians in world history, some of people's favorite artists. You've contributed to some of our favorite songs. So I want to give you your flowers. So for the viewers who may not recognize you, let them know who you are and definitely where you're from.
Hi, my name is Susan Rogers, and I am speaking to you from upstate New York. I think I'm on this program because I made records for a long time, for 22 years, some of them with Prince and with a whole lot of other artists back in the 80s and 90s. And now I teach for Berklee College of Music.
Wow, that's amazing. That's truly amazing. So I got to ask you this. What was your first like interaction with music? Did you have musicians in the house or did you fall in love with music, over the radio or television or
Yeah, I think it was mostly the radio. So I don't come from a musical family. They like music, but nobody played or anything like that. Um, I was one of those kids, like a lot of kids who are really attracted to music, and usually those kids will become musicians. They learn to play an instrument, they play or sing or something. But there are many of us who love music like crazy, and we don't want to be musicians. We are the kinds of people who go into being DJs or A&R executives or band managers, or in many cases we become recording engineers or record producers. We want to be around music, we just don't want to be the ones playing it.
okay, okay. Now I can ask you this for the viewers. What exactly is a recording engineer? Because a lot of times we take for granted the work that goes into our favorite albums or our favorite songs. So what exactly do you do as a recording engineer?
Yeah, the recording engineer's job is to capture those performances using microphones or MIDI with electronic sources. Capture that music and store it some way. In my day, we stored it on analog tape, and these days, of course, you store it in a computer. But the engineer's job is to get it from the musicians and the singers into the storage device, and then get it off of that storage device and mix it and make it available to the listeners. These days you do it by streaming, but in my day we made vinyl records, we made CDs and cassettes and things like that. So the engineer is responsible for the technical stuff on a record. The producer is more responsible for the performance of the musicians. So the producer goes through all the material, the song choices, the lyric choices, comes up with arrangements along with the artists, and listens to those performances as they're going down in the studio, deciding, if you got the right take or not. Being a producer is kind of like being a director on a film.
Wow, I appreciate you sharing that insight because, like I say, sometimes we might get an album in 60 minutes or we listen to a song, it's 5 minutes. We don't realize how much work goes into that, that finished product. And then it's like with an engineer, you might have the best singer, you might have the best production, but if the mix isn't right, it will sound totally different. So I
That
appreciate
is
the
so
work that
true.
you have done, so
Yeah, that is
yeah.
so true. It's just I think it's a lot like making movies. I don't know anything about making movies except for what we did with Prince, but there's going to be technical people, and then there's going to be artistic people, there's going to be script writers, and it's going to be people who handle the hair and the makeup and the clothes and the set design and all that stuff. And likewise, when we make music, it's not like we just go into the studio and do a 60-minute album in 60 minutes. It takes a long time. Back in my day, I keep saying my day because everything's changed, but back in like the 80s and 90s, typically it'd take about 3 months to do a full album, top to bottom. That was about average. You could take longer and you could go faster, but for most people, about 3 months to do a whole album. And if you were just working on a single, doing one single, it took about a week's worth of work in the studio every day.
Wow, that's amazing because you was making some top notch music. So I can
Mm.
ask you this, by you being Dr. Rogers, you're a professor and you teaching this, but like you say, so much has changed. Do you have a preference? Do you kind of miss the way that it was done back in the old days, or has it been an easy transition? And how do you like the digital process for recording and making music?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I don't like it at all. I don't like the newer way, in part because I'm not used to it, and also because I stopped making records in 2000. I entered college as a freshman. I did 8 straight years. I got my PhD. I came to Berkeley. So I haven't made records since the old days, the 80s and 90s. When I made records, it was on analog tape. That's the system I know. That's the equipment that I love. That's how I like working. When we switched over to digital, the way people make music today is really different. Some things are the same, but a lot of things are really different. And the biggest thing that changed is you used to have a record deal to get into the recording studio. Recording studios were and are really expensive. So you needed to be a signed artist, spend a lot of time in the studio. But these days, a recording studio is in your laptop, even in some cases in your phone. So there are a lot of people making really good music with a very different technology. That's been great because it lets younger people who don't have money, people who don't have a record deal, it lets them be able to make music, and that's fantastic. But the hard part of that is with so many people making music, it gets much more difficult to find who's doing the really good stuff. That's there's always pluses and minuses anytime there's new technology.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Now I can ask you, at what point did you feel like you got into the industry and you connected with people like Prince? Like, how did that come about? Was it like a long journey for you? Was it difficult? Were you just at the right place at the right time, or did you have to work with a few people then?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated. I started in 1978. I grew up in Southern California, so I was close to Hollywood. So that was an advantage. If you're going to be in the music business, you want to be in a music industry city where there are record labels, meaning New York or LA or Nashville or Miami, where they have record labels. So I was in Los Angeles, which was good. I was female, and I still am female. Which is bad, because you just, especially in those days, you didn't see many women in technical positions. One of the things that I knew, however, that I could do without benefit of a formal education, I could I could study, I could read. Like one of my friends said, he grew up, lower middle class like me. We didn't have money. And he said, we might not be able to afford to go to college, but we can afford the textbooks. And he was right. We could go to the bookstore, we could buy books, we could study audio and electronics and things like that on our own. And that's what I did. And it was through that I was able to get an entry level job as an audio technician. And ultimately, what I ended up doing was repairing audio equipment in Los Angeles. I'd been at it for about 5 years when I heard through the professional grapevine that Prince was looking for a technician. Now, at this time, 1983, Prince was my favorite artist in the whole world. My favorite. I had all his records. I had seen him on tour when he'd come through Los Angeles on the Dirty Mind tour and the 1999 tour. He was my absolute favorite artist. So to hear that my favorite artist was looking for a technician, and I was a technician, and he liked working with women, well, it just seemed like I was made for that gig. And his management interviewed me. They were based out in LA, and I went to their offices and they interviewed me and they said, okay, fine, you'll do. Get on a plane and go to Minnesota. And they hired me and I did. It worked out really well because, like I said, Prince liked working with women. He also really liked working with outsiders, people who didn't fit the usual mold. I did not look like your average technician. Nearly all of them, I mean, I didn't know any other women who were technicians. They're all guys. And when Prince had a chance to hire someone who was a little bit different, or who maybe didn't have the same chance as other people did, that's the person he would hire. So I had that going for me. It also helped that not only was I a Prince fan, I listened to the same music he did growing up. When I was growing up, my favorite music was always soul music right from the start. Who knows why? But I knew that Sly Stone, Al Green, James Brown, all that just felt right. And that was the music that I loved the most. So when we'd be in the studio with Prince, if he's talking about Frankie Beverly and Maze or One Way featuring Al Hudson or some of these, main ingredient, floaters, some of these lesser known bands, at least lesser known in the general pop community. If he was talking about R&B, I knew what he was talking about. I had those records. So that helped a lot. So he and I had a good run. We worked in the studio pretty much every day at the height of his success, in the mid 80s.
Wow, that's amazing. That's truly amazing. I mean, because people, like you say, you was a big fan of his, so people just dream of even meeting someone like that just for 2 seconds to get an autograph or shake their hand, but to actually be a part of some of his biggest and best, musical projects. That's just as much your music as well. That's just phenomenal.
Yeah, that was very exciting. Although I emphasize to students, if you want things like that to happen in your life, you have to put yourself in the place where those things are happening. A lot of times students think, well, what I want to do is move back home to Boise, Idaho, or somewhere in Nebraska and start my music career. Okay, music can be made anywhere. It can be sold anywhere. But the music industry isn't in all of those places. I was in Hollywood, California, which meant that if you do all your preparation and you know your stuff and you work really hard and you're prepared, like the saying says, success happens when preparation meets opportunity. You have to be prepared and ready for it, but then you have to be where the opportunities can find you. Yeah.
Wow, wow, that's great advice. I'm processing that, and in comparison to my dreams and where I can fit in. But that's definitely some great advice. Now I want to ask you about working with Prince. Which projects did you actually get a chance to work on, and what was your role? Were you always doing recording, engineering, or did you do any other tasks?
No, I was always his engineer. On later records, I produced with other people, but Prince was his own producer, so he didn't need that. So I engineered and mixed with him. I joined him on Purple Rain. He had already gotten started, and I finished up Purple Rain. I think I came in about the middle of that process, and I worked on the movie and the tour and the Purple Rain album. And then after that, Around the World in a Day, then the Parade album, then Sign of the Times. The Black album, all of the tracks except for one were tracks that I recorded, but I left right before he decided to release the Black album. So I guess we can kind of include the Black album. Then in that time, he was, of course, making records with a lot of other people. So we did records with Sheila E. and The Time and Apollonia 6 and all the one-off records that he would do for other artists like Shaka Khan or Sheena Easton or the Bangles. So many people would ask him for a song, and we'd take time to stop what we were doing, record a song, and send it over to another studio for another artist. Lots and lots and lots of work in a short period of time.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Let me see. I wanted to ask you one more question about working with Prince. I was reading online. Sometimes on Wikipedia stuff may be correct or not. It was saying something about the Universal fire. They were saying like a lot of masters to different records had got destroyed, but you were able to do something to prevent Prince's records from getting destroyed. If you could talk about that and what does that mean? Like in layman's terms to the average music lover that you were able to save the masters to Prince's records.
Right. Well, this is where innocence and naivety can actually be an asset. So, for most recording artists, what would happen is you get signed to a record deal, and the record label is like a bank, which means they own your master tapes. Belongs to them. They're giving you the front money to make a record. So, it literally is their property until you recoup and you pay them back from your earnings. And then those tapes belong to you and you can take the tapes back. Anyway, most artists don't bother taking them back. So, what that means is the record labels have to keep these massive warehouses of tapes, multi track tapes, stereo tapes, all that kind of stuff. Now, when I went to work for Prince, I was an audio technician, not an engineer. So, I didn't know that. All I knew is that Prince would occasionally ask me to pull this tape or pull that tape. And I was his new employee. I had to know where all these things were because he was my boss and I had to keep track of all the tapes. So I found all the tapes that I could find around Minnesota in various studios where he had worked, and I started collecting them all in one place. Then I started calling Warner Brothers, the record label out in Burbank, California, and asking them, "Do you have any Prince tapes in your vault? Prince wants them. Can you send them all to me?" And they would ship them to me. What ended up happening was that was the beginning of Prince's famous vault. When we built Paisley Park Studios, he wanted down in the basement a massive bank vault with a big bank vault door, and all of his tapes would be in there. He wanted that, so we did it. We built it for him. Uh, then in the 2000s, I don't remember what year this was, but in the early 2000s, there was a massive fire out in Burbank, California, and untold numbers of artists' tapes were destroyed in this massive fire. There was this huge vault that kept all these tapes from Universal Music Group, of which Warner Brothers was a part of. And so many classic tapes were destroyed in that fire. Thankfully, none of them were Prince tapes because we had started the process back in 1983 of keeping all of his tapes at home, and he just kept that up for his whole career. So we're fortunate for that.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. I mean, because you always hear about him recording so much music, you just imagine like how much music that is and to have the actual master. So I got to thank you again.
Tay, I got to tell you, it was more than just recording music. That man wanted to be playing music every single day. And if he was playing music, he wanted to be recording it, which isn't a big deal today because we've got hard drives and computers and you just record. Storage isn't a problem. But back in the days of analog tape, you had to store it on tape. So whether we were at rehearsal, if we were on tour, if we were on a movie set, no matter what we were doing, recording live shows, whatever, he recorded everything. So the amount of tape that his music created was like a mountain. It was a huge amount of tape. How the Prince estate even started going through all the tapes that he left behind is just unimaginable because he left behind not just musical tapes, but videotapes from rehearsal and from shows on tour and from all the stuff we did. A huge amount of work.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I wanted to ask you about some of the other artists that you got a chance to work with. I looked online. You got a chance to work with Tevin Campbell on his first one or two projects.
Yeah, that was a highlight of my life. So I didn't get to meet him because I was just doing mixing, but do you remember Al B. Sure, the
Yeah,
artist?
definitely.
Loved Al B. Sure. I loved his that first solo album that he had. I used to listen to that a lot. Anyway, I was contacted by him to do some mixing because Al and I think it's his cousin, a guy named Kyle West, did some writing for Tevin Campbell's first album. So they invited me and I mixed a few songs on that album working with Al in New York. He was the man was a joy to work with. I really like him so much. I haven't seen him in years, but he's a really good guy and a brilliant, brilliant musician and songwriter. That was a true highlight working on that record.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. Now you worked with the Barenaked Ladies on the Stunt album, and they had the big track 1 week. What was that like? What was that process like?
So those guys, this was back in the late 90s, but they're from Canada, very smart, very funny. The two main songwriters, Ed and Steven, met each other at some sort of camp for really bright kids when they were like teenagers. So you're working with guys who are smart and funny. Now, these folks toured a lot. And like a lot of musicians who tour a lot, they're really good on their instruments. People who tour a lot get really good. And so we worked very quickly. They had a lot of songs. They could play them very well. Didn't take long to get good takes. They were great singers. They were wonderful to work with. I only had 3 weeks of time in between projects, and then I had to move on. I had another record booked. I had to move on. So it was produced by me and Barenaked Ladies, and also a fellow named David Leonard. So I got 3 weeks worth of work done, turned it over to David Leonard. He finished it from there. And in a short period of time, we did this record. I was very happy and very surprised when it went to number one. That was back in the old days. Now, if you young people are listening, this is going to make you sad. Sorry, it's not my fault. But back in the old days, when people went to a store and bought music, the producers and the artists made a lot of money. If you had a platinum album, if you sold 1 million copies and people went to the store and bought it, you made good royalty money. These days with streaming, it doesn't work like that. You can have 1 million streams and you're not making a lot of money. But in the days of selling records, you did. So this was just at the late end of the 90s, and I did make a lot of money as a producer, co-producer on that record. And with that money, I was able to go to college. So I'm very grateful to those guys for the good work that we did.
Wow, yeah, that was an amazing time because I could remember going to buy tapes and CDs, and even my parents, they had records, the albums, but like you say now everything is on a cell phone. So it just feels like it's a big piece, that unfortunately the younger generation they may not get to experience or even appreciate, from the artist, looking at the album cover and touching the vinyl and stuff like that.
Yeah, and yet, you know,
Okay.
I was going to say, technology changes, but people don't change. Not that fast. So people still want what they want. They want the music that they love. They want it to be good music. They want good lyrics and good melodies and good rhythms. They want good sound design. They want good mixing. So people are still seeking the same thing that the older generation was looking for. We all like the same things. The other issue that doesn't change is if people want something, someone else is going to figure out how to make money from what they want. So someone else is going to figure out how to make money and make sure that the artists get paid so that they keep making more music, and make sure that it's at least cost effective for the consumer. It's we're moving the numbers around a little bit, but I think the days are going to come back when artists and record makers are again making good money. At least the ones at the top will be making good money.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we're about 25 minutes in, so I guess I could ask you maybe one more question. What are a few other artists that you got a chance to work with? Because I know I didn't get to cover everybody, but if you know, for the viewers, if they want to go back and check the credits and catalog and stuff.
Yeah. Um, I mentioned earlier that my first love was R&B, soul music. I was not called to do those records. There was an engineer named Bernie Perkins. Barney Perkins worked out of Los Angeles, and he got all those records that I would have liked to have had. Anita Baker and stuff like that. He was a great engineer. I got called to a lot of alternative indie stuff, which wasn't, as Prince would have said, it wasn't the musical street I lived on, but yet I liked it and I was good at it. And so I worked with artists like Geggy Tah and Jeff Black and the blues guitarist Robin Ford, and I worked with, as you mentioned, Barenaked Ladies and Michael Penn and quite a lot of artists. An artist out of Miami, Cuban American named Nil Lara, and yeah, it's a pretty long discography. The majority of it is on the alternative indie charts, with some exceptions, with the Tevin Campbells and Prince and an artist named Kevin Sandbloom, whom I've always loved very much. Yeah, folks like that.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you again so much for taking out the time to come on this platform. I know you got so much going on, you got moves to make. I want to thank the viewers again for tuning in. It's been another phenomenal episode of Taye Speaks. So until next time, thank you so much. Peace.
Thank you, Taye. I guess I was pronouncing your name wrong. Thank you very much for inviting me again, and nice to meet you. And good luck to you in your career.
Thank you so much. No, Tay is fine. People call me that all the time. That's my name. It's just like tomato. You know, it's the same.
Okay. All righty then. Well, have a lovely week, and reach out if you need anything.
All right, you too. Take care.
Bye.